In the wake of a devastating accident that left several individuals critically injured, the local community faced a dire blood shortage. Hospitals were in a race against time, desperately trying to procure enough blood to save lives. Witnessing this urgent need spurred me into action. I could no longer remain a passive observer. Something had to be done. After much contemplation, I decided to host a community blood drive right in my backyard. The idea seemed simple yet powerful. The backyard provided an inviting and easily accessible space for neighbors and friends to come together, support each other, and contribute to the greater good. With an enthusiastic resolve, I reached out to the Red Cross to secure their collaboration. Their representative was supportive and assured me that everything would go smoothly as long as we adhered to the guidelines they provided. As the day of the event approached, excitement mingled with anxiety. I gathered volunteers from the neighborhood, turned our garden into a somewhat makeshift clinic with chairs and tents, and encouraged everyone I knew to participate. Flyers were distributed, social media posts shared, and word of mouth spread like wildfire. The sense of community unity was palpable. People were eager to help, driven by both compassion and urgency. But amidst this hopeful atmosphere emerged an unexpected obstacle: the Homeowners Association, HOA. Though they had been relatively hands-off in previous community activities, this time they suddenly resurfaced with claims that the blood drive was an unauthorized public event. Their members descended upon my backyard mid-donation, just as donors arrived with sleeves rolled up and smiles on their faces, delivering abrupt news that no one had seen coming. That moment shattered the hopeful atmosphere we had cultivated. Volunteers, busy helping donors fill out forms or offering refreshments, abruptly stopped as the HOA's representatives insisted we cease all operations immediately. The confusion and frustration were overwhelming. This event had received prior approval from the Red Cross, yet here we were, facing interruption from authority figures claiming jurisdiction over our actions. Just hours after this distressing confrontation unfolded, heartbreak hit harder than anyone could have imagined. News broke that 3 patients who had survived the initial accident tragically succumbed to their injuries, all because there wasn't enough blood available for transfusions at the hospital. The emotional weight of these losses settled heavily on our community. In those moments of grief and outrage, sentiments shifted sharply against the HOA's narrow-minded decision. It quickly became evident that something bigger than a simple dispute was at play. This was about lives lost due to misguided authority over a space meant for healing and hope. The call for accountability sparked within us all, igniting a fire for change that refused to be extinguished. As I prepared for the blood drive, each step felt like a small act of defiance against the crisis unfolding in our community. The urgency to help was palpable, and I was determined to create an environment that fostered a sense of hope and unity. After securing the essential approval from the Red Cross, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. They provided guidelines that were clear and straightforward, outlining everything from safety protocols to logistical arrangements. With that foundation laid, the next challenge was rallying volunteers. I reached out to friends, neighbors, and local community groups, sharing not just the need but also the vision of what we could achieve together. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People were eager to lend a hand. It wasn't just about giving blood, it was about coming together as a community during a time of distress. Soon enough, I had gathered a dedicated team willing to assist with various tasks, from greeting donors to providing refreshments. Transforming my backyard into a donation center was no small feat. Tents were erected in neat rows, adorned with colorful banners that read "Donate Life" and "Every Drop Counts." We set up tables for registration and refreshments, ensuring that everyone felt welcomed and appreciated for their contributions. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle under the shade of trees, creating a comfortable atmosphere, a stark contrast to the sterile hospital setting where many would usually donate. In addition to physical preparations, there was also an emotional component to consider. I wanted everyone who arrived to feel not just like contributors, but like part of something larger than themselves. We hung string lights to add warmth and brought in potted plants to enhance the inviting space. It became clear that this was more than just a blood drive. It was an opportunity for connection during a time when fear and uncertainty loomed large. The day before the event, nerves mixed with excitement filled the air. As volunteers helped set up tables and chairs, laughter echoed through my backyard, an uplifting melody amid such serious times. We conducted brief training sessions on how to assist donors while ensuring their comfort and safety throughout the process. As I lay in bed that night, I reflected on everything we had accomplished together. A sense of pride washed over me. This wasn't merely about collecting blood, it represented solidarity within our community amidst adversity. With every detail meticulously planned, I felt ready for the next day's challenges. Little did I know that those challenges would soon escalate beyond anything we anticipated. But as dawn broke over our suburban neighborhood, so too did hope, the kind born from collective effort and compassion for one another in dire times. As excitement built in my neighborhood for the upcoming blood drive, an underlying tension began to surface surrounding the Homeowners Association, HOA. Established to maintain the aesthetic and adherence to community guidelines, the HOA had a reputation for being vocal, some would say overzealous, about any activities that strayed from their regulations. Although they typically focused on matters like landscaping and property disputes, their authority extended far beyond mere aesthetics. They were tasked with overseeing community events as well. Historically, the HOA had been involved in various public gatherings, often regulating them with strict rules. Residents frequently encountered hurdles when trying to organize events, from block parties to yard sales. While some appreciated the order they brought, others felt stifled by what seemed like unnecessary bureaucracy. In fact, many neighbors held mixed feelings about the HOA's involvement in our lives. We valued community spirit, but also longed for autonomy within our own spaces. As I began preparing for the blood drive, I was aware of this complex relationship between residents and the HOA. Unlike previous events that had been hindered by red tape, I felt confident due to the Red Cross's backing. Their approval seemed a powerful statement that we were undertaking something essential and unifying rather than frivolous or disruptive. However, this confidence was short-lived. The day of the event saw an unexpected visit from HOA representatives who claimed that my backyard blood drive had not been sanctioned appropriately and classified it as an unauthorized public event. Their arrival disrupted not just our preparations, but also shattered the sense of community we were trying to cultivate. As they enforced their jurisdiction over our gathering, it became clear that they weren't merely concerned about compliance. There was a deeper narrative at play, one where authority clashed with communal need. This encounter triggered frustration among volunteers and neighbors alike. Many had witnessed firsthand how our community rallied around one another during desperate times, yet here was an organization standing in the way of something truly vital. The volunteers looked bewildered as they processed both the importance of the cause and the abrupt interruption by those entrusted with maintaining our community's well-being. As whispers of discontent grew louder among residents post-incident, memories surfaced of other events where residents felt similarly thwarted by HOA regulations. It became evident that this was not simply about a single blood drive. It was reflective of larger tensions within our neighborhood regarding governance and community engagement. In the aftermath of that fateful confrontation, questions loomed large about accountability and priorities. Why were we facing opposition while attempting to save lives? This moment would ignite conversations far beyond just local governance. It marked a turning point in our fight for unity amidst adversity as we grappled with deeper issues surrounding authority and responsibility within our own community. As the sun rose higher in the sky, illuminating our backyard transformed into a hub of hope and solidarity, the ambience was filled with laughter and conversations. Donors were arriving, some carrying their own stories of loss and motivation to give. The energy was electric, reflecting the urgency of the moment. Volunteers moved about, handing out refreshments and guiding people through the donation process with enthusiasm. Yet just as we felt we were making a real impact, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Without warning, a small group of HOA representatives arrived, their presence stark against the vibrant scene we had cultivated. Dressed in formal attire that seemed at odds with the casual spirit of our gathering, they strode into the backyard with an air of authority. Confusion rippled through the crowd as they approached me, their leader brandishing a clipboard as if it were a weapon of compliance. "Excuse me," he announced loudly, drawing the attention of everyone present. "This is an unauthorized public event, and we need to shut it down immediately." The weight of his words hung heavily in the air, interrupting conversations and freezing smiles in place. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The Red Cross had given us full approval. What do you mean unauthorized? I asked, trying to maintain my composure amid the rising tension. We followed all the necessary protocols and received support from the Red Cross. The representative's expression hardened. Regardless of any previous approvals, you have not obtained permission from the HOA for this blood drive. We cannot allow it to continue. Murmurs erupted among the volunteers and donors. A mixture of disbelief and frustration echoed around me. People exchanged looks, some shaking their heads in annoyance at this sudden interference. It was clear that this was more than just an issue about paperwork. This was about lives that could be saved. I attempted to reason with them, explaining the urgency of our mission and how many lives depended on our efforts that day. But my words fell flat against their adamant stance. "Rules are rules," he replied curtly. "We have procedures for such events." As tensions escalated, emotions flared among those gathered. Volunteers stood up for one another, expressing their indignation. "This is not just an event, it's a life-saving effort," one volunteer shouted, his voice filled with passion. The sense of community that had electrified our gathering began to fracture under this unwelcome intrusion. The confrontation reached a boiling point as neighbors joined in to voice their discontent with the HOA's decision-making process. Pushed into a corner by authority figures who seemed disconnected from our needs, we rallied together to defend not just our right to host this event, but also our right to care for one another in times of crisis. In that moment, amidst shouts and pleas for understanding, it became painfully clear that something deeper was at stake. A clash between bureaucratic authority and urgent human compassion that would reverberate throughout our community long after the HOA representatives had left. As the shouting subsided and the reality of the situation set in, an overwhelming wave of emotions washed over everyone present. The laughter that had filled the air moments before was replaced by a heavy silence, punctuated only by murmurs of disbelief and frustration. Volunteers who had worked tirelessly to create a welcoming environment now stood frozen, their faces reflecting a mixture of anger and heartbreak. Among them was Sarah, a young mother who had brought her 2 kids along. She had shared with me earlier how her sister had survived a critical illness thanks to timely blood donations. Now, as she watched the HOA representatives shut down our efforts, her eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted to help," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. It was clear that her desire to make a difference had been thwarted by an authority that seemed indifferent to the very human stakes at play. Then there was Tom, a retired firefighter who had seen firsthand the toll of emergencies on families and communities. He had signed up to donate blood as soon as he heard about the drive. "I've saved lives before," he said confidently during our earlier conversations. Now he stood with clenched fists at his sides, grappling with the frustration of being denied a chance to contribute. "This is ridiculous. How can they do this when people's lives are on the line?" His passion for serving others became evident as he rallied fellow donors around him, urging them to unite against the injustice of the situation. The emotional impact rippled through volunteers and donors alike, many sharing personal stories about why they were there. One elderly gentleman spoke of his late wife who had needed numerous transfusions during her battle with cancer. "Every drop counts," he said earnestly. "I'm here to ensure that no one else has to go through what we did." His words resonated deeply with many in attendance and served as a reminder of the very real impacts of blood shortages on families. As tensions escalated, we saw unity emerge as volunteers began hugging one another, sharing words of encouragement. They formed small circles, some praying quietly, while others voiced their shared outrage at the HOA's intrusion. It was a powerful moment that transformed our frustration into collective determination. We were not just individuals caught in a bureaucratic mess, but a community bound together by a common purpose. Although our immediate goal of collecting blood was halted, what emerged from this confrontation was something deeper, a recognition of our interconnectedness and commitment to support one another in times of need. As emotions ran high, it became increasingly clear that this struggle against the HOA was not just about the drive itself. It was about advocating for compassion in our community and ensuring that we never lose sight of what truly matters, saving lives. In that moment of shared struggle, hope flickered anew as we resolved to stand together, ready to amplify our voices not only for ourselves but for those who were counting on us, the very people whose lives hung in the balance. Just hours after the emotional turmoil of the blood drive's abrupt halt, the reality of our community's situation hit like a thunderclap. News began to spread like wildfire, a devastating report that would stir the anger and grief of everyone involved. 3 critically injured victims from the nearby accident, people whom many in our community had hoped to help through our gathering, had passed away at the hospital due to a lack of blood supply. When the news reached me, I was still reeling from the chaos of the day. I had just left my backyard, where the remnants of our failed endeavor lingered, a few folding chairs, hastily discarded flyers, and empty water bottles scattered across the grass. Reading the text message from a friend who worked at the hospital sent chills down my spine. The words, they didn't make it, echoed in my mind, intertwining with the frustration and sorrow I'd felt during the confrontation with the HOA representatives. It was an unbearable realization that our efforts to donate blood had been cut short just when they were needed most. As heartbreaking stories began to surface about the 3 individuals who had lost their lives, the weight of their absence took form. A collective sense of loss enveloped our community. Each victim was a person with loved ones, dreams unfulfilled, and lives untold. Their names became symbols of what could have been if only we had been allowed to proceed. As I reached out to fellow volunteers and donors, I could hear their disbelief turning into anguish as they processed this tragedy. Sarah, the young mother who had hoped to honor her sister's legacy through her donation, broke down in tears as she grasped the implications of our halted event. "If only we could have helped," she lamented, her voice a mix of sorrow and guilt resonating through our calls. Tom added with anger laced in his voice, "We could have saved them. This is unacceptable." His emotions mirrored those of many others who felt bound by more than just regulations. They were haunted by what could have happened if only things had gone differently. As news spread across social media channels and local groups, outrage against the HOA's rigid enforcement grew. Posts filled with grief turned into calls for accountability and justice. The community's collective grief transformed into action. People began organizing protests, demanding answers about why our effort to donate blood was not only shut down but deemed unauthorized in such dire circumstances. In that moment of profound loss, we realized this wasn't solely about blood donations. It was a catalyst for change that ignited an unwavering resolve among us. No longer content to silently accept bureaucratic indifference, we vowed to honor those who had tragically lost their lives by advocating for policies that valued human life over red tape. In our hearts, a fire ignited, a reminder that even amid heartbreak, we shared a united purpose: to ensure that no one else would face such a tragic fate due to regulatory barriers in times of need. Together, we would channel our grief into action, refusing to let our voices be silenced or our compassion stifled by authority again. In the days following the tragic news of the 3 victims, the community's outrage exploded into a powerful wave that demanded accountability. Social media became a battleground for discourse on civic responsibility, as residents expressed their collective grief and frustration regarding the HOA's decision to halt our blood drive. Posts flooded local groups, each one echoing the sentiments of those who were eager to help, but had been thwarted by an authority that seemed more concerned with regulations than lives. Neighbors who had previously felt ambivalent towards the HOA now united in their critique of the organization's rigid enforcement. Many shared personal accounts of how they had either benefited from blood donations or knew someone who had suffered due to shortages. "We're not just homeowners, we're a community," one resident passionately stated in a public forum. "We should be able to come together in times of need without facing obstacles." This sentiment marked a pivotal shift in our town's dialogue. The conversation evolved beyond the immediate anger directed at the HOA. It expanded to encompass a broader discussion about civic engagement and the importance of supporting local initiatives. Some residents began drafting an open letter, advocating for more flexible regulations regarding community events, particularly those aimed at addressing urgent health needs. There were calls for town hall meetings where residents could voice grievances and discuss solutions actively. Petitions circulated rapidly, gathering signatures from those who claimed that the HOA's strict rules should not supersede our community's moral obligation to support one another during crises. It was inspiring to witness neighbors who had never spoken out before now passionately advocating for change, demonstrating that tragedy could galvanize hearts and minds into action. Local businesses joined in solidarity, offering their support for future blood drives and similar community initiatives by providing space and resources. Coffee shops displayed signs encouraging donations, while others pledged a portion of their sales to help fund future events aimed at boosting local blood supplies. A sense of unity began to flourish amidst the grief, reminding everyone that together, we could enact real change. In the heart of this turmoil emerged new leaders, individuals inspired to take charge and form a community committee focusing on health awareness and emergency preparedness. They organized workshops about managing blood supply shortages and collaborated with health organizations to streamline future efforts. As protests against the HOA gained traction, they were transformed into not just acts of defiance, but celebrations of community spirit. Signs reading, "Together we can save lives," became symbols of hope rather than frustration. Instead of viewing the HOA solely as an obstruction, many started redefining their role within our neighborhood as stakeholders with voices that mattered. This wave of activism propelled us toward constructive dialogue about civic responsibility and underscored our commitment to foster a culture where helping one another is not only encouraged but recognized as essential. In standing up against indifference imposed by bureaucracy, we found empowerment in our shared humanity, a testament to what can be achieved when we are willing to speak up for what truly matters. Through every challenge faced, our resolve was solidified. We would not let bureaucratic barriers deter the spirit of compassion that united us all. In the weeks following the uproar over the blood drive fiasco, an investigation into the HOA's actions was officially launched, drawing significant attention from both residents and local media. Community meetings became a focal point as residents gathered to voice their grievances and demand accountability. The first meeting was held at the town hall, where tensions ran high and emotions were palpable. Attendees filled the room, sharing personal stories of loss and frustration, underscoring how they felt the HOA had prioritized regulations over human lives. As residents took to the microphone, testimonies revealed a pattern of dissatisfaction with the HOA's governance. Many speakers articulated how their experiences mirrored the frustrations surrounding the blood drive event, instances where community initiatives had been stifled by seemingly arbitrary rules. One resident spoke passionately about a previous attempt to organize a neighborhood festival that had been shut down due to overly strict permits, echoing sentiments that resonated with many in attendance. "We're all neighbors here," she said vehemently. "Why can't we support each other without jumping through endless hoops?" What? Media coverage of these events exploded, with local news outlets eager to cover the community's outcry. Journalists interviewed attendees outside town hall meetings, capturing raw emotions in sound bites that resonated widely across social platforms. Reports highlighted not just the anger directed at the HOA, but also the renewed sense of community spirit ignited by this incident. Pictures of packed meetings and passionate speeches took center stage. In response to mounting pressure, members of the HOA agreed to participate in a public forum aimed at addressing grievances and explaining their stance. This was a rare opportunity for dialogue that many hoped would lead to productive outcomes. When it came time for HOA representatives to speak, they attempted to defend their actions by citing rules meant to protect property values and maintain order within the community. However, as they spoke, it became clear that many residents felt their priorities were misguided at best. The atmosphere shifted dramatically as residents pushed back against these justifications, demanding more empathy and flexibility in their governance approach. "You're supposed to serve us. What good are rules if they harm our community?" echoed through the crowd, leading to applause and cheers from fellow attendees. As pressure continued to build, grassroots initiatives began forming within the community aimed at reforming HOA policies regarding emergency responses and public gatherings. A task force emerged, comprising volunteers who focused on drafting new guidelines for community events, ones that prioritized health and safety without undermining civic engagement. Through all these efforts, it became increasingly apparent that this investigation was more than just an inquiry into one specific incident. It evolved into a movement advocating for better governance practices that aligned more closely with community needs and values. Residents found strength in unity as they rallied together not only for justice, but also for positive change. With each meeting and protest, it became clear that this was about reclaiming our right as a community to come together during times of crisis. a fight against bureaucracy that threatened lives rather than protecting them. As citizens spoke out and organized themselves into a formidable voice demanding accountability from their elected representatives and regulatory bodies like the HOA, hope blossomed anew in what had once felt like an insurmountable struggle for civic integrity. The incident surrounding the blood drive not only sparked outrage, but also led to profound changes in community dynamics and awareness about blood donation needs. As residents began to reflect on the tragedy, it became increasingly clear that many were unaware of the critical shortages faced by local hospitals and the vital role blood donations play in saving lives. The loss of 3 victims served as a wake-up call, igniting conversations about the importance of regular blood drives and the need for community members to step forward as donors. In the weeks following the crisis, several community groups and local organizations joined forces to promote awareness about blood donation. Informational workshops were held in schools, churches, and community centers, educating residents on how blood donations could directly impact those in critical need. Social media campaigns took off, featuring compelling testimonials from individuals whose lives had been saved due to timely transfusions. "Your donation can be someone's lifeline," became a rallying cry that resonated throughout the town. Moreover, the HOA found itself at a crossroads, facing immense pressure to reevaluate its policies regarding community events. In response to the backlash, they initiated a series of meetings aimed at revising their guidelines to allow for more flexibility, especially in emergencies. Residents proposed changes that would expedite approval processes for events that addressed urgent health needs, ensuring that future efforts to support one another would not be hindered by bureaucratic red tape. The HOA began collaborating with local health organizations to create a streamlined process for organizing blood drives and similar initiatives. As these discussions unfolded, the relationship between the community and the HOA gradually transformed. No longer viewed solely as an authority figure enforcing regulations, the HOA started to adopt a more collaborative approach, one that recognized the importance of supporting community-led initiatives. This shift was reflected in their willingness to co-host events with local organizations, fostering a spirit of cooperation rather than confrontation. Additionally, local businesses jumped on board, eager to support blood donation efforts. Restaurants began offering discounts to donors and hosting blood drives on site, while gyms organized fitness challenges where participants could donate blood in exchange for prizes. This collective effort not only increased participation in blood donation drives, but also strengthened ties between businesses and residents, creating a sense of shared purpose within the community. The incident ultimately became a catalyst for broader discussions about civic responsibility and community engagement. Conversations shifted from frustration towards finding solutions. Residents recognized their power to affect change through collective action. As they worked together to implement new policies and promote awareness about blood donation needs, a renewed sense of identity emerged within the community. What began as a confrontation over regulations evolved into an ongoing dialogue about how best to support one another during crises. The once divided community found unity in their shared values and commitment to ensuring that no one else would face such tragic circumstances due to bureaucratic barriers. The impact of this incident reshaped relationships within our neighborhood, reinforcing the idea that compassion and cooperation are essential in fostering a resilient community capable of overcoming adversity together. Reflecting on the tumultuous events that unfolded from the planned blood drive, I find myself acutely aware of the personal growth I experienced throughout this ordeal. What began as a simple initiative to help our community quickly transformed into a profound lesson about advocacy and the power of collective action. In those chaotic moments when the HOA representatives disrupted our gathering, I felt an overwhelming sense of helplessness mixed with frustration. However, as the days passed and the weight of our shared grief turned into a rallying cry for change, I learned how vital it is to rise in the face of adversity. It became clear that advocating for one's community is not merely about protesting authority. It's about cultivating a collective voice that resonates louder than any single dissenting opinion. Our combined efforts showcased how ordinary individuals can unite to demand change for the greater good. This experience illuminated the importance of community unity, especially during crises. Witnessing my neighbors come together to support one another was both heartening and enlightening. We shared stories, tears, and hopes for change, all while acknowledging the very real human need for compassion and connection. The initial anger towards bureaucratic restrictions evolved into a commitment to foster dialogue and create solutions that empower residents rather than stifle them. In addition to advocating for blood donation and emergency preparedness, this incident underscored a more significant lesson about health needs within our community. Increased awareness surrounding blood donation emerged as many residents began recognizing their role in addressing local health challenges. Understanding that lives depend on timely donations emphasized our responsibility to engage in such efforts consistently rather than only in times of crisis. As we organized meetings and workshops, I took on an active role in helping educate others about blood donation needs. Witnessing neighbors evolve into advocates provided me with a renewed sense of purpose and fulfillment. There was something deeply rewarding about being part of a movement dedicated not just to addressing an immediate need, but also to creating a culture where civic engagement is celebrated. Moreover, this journey highlighted how essential it is for governing bodies like the HOA to adapt to community needs instead of rigidly adhering to outdated regulations. As changes were made to streamline processes for hosting events aimed at public health initiatives, I learned that accountability goes both ways. Residents must hold authorities accountable while also stepping forward with constructive dialogue. Ultimately, these experiences have instilled within me a determination to remain engaged in my community moving forward. I recognize now more than ever that lasting change takes time and effort, but it starts with individuals willing to speak up and advocate for what they believe is right. In closing, I've learned that adversity can forge resilience and ignite passion for advocacy among us all. The lessons extracted from this journey will accompany me always, an enduring reminder that when we unite as a community with compassion at our core, we can navigate even the most challenging circumstances together while ensuring that public health needs are met without barriers. This commitment to each other creates not just stronger bonds, but also a thriving future for all residents.